Joining us now from Springfield, Missouri, is a former special agent of the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. He served in law enforcement 28 years. Brian Townsend, who is an expert on the drug situation. All right, I don't understand. So if you're sealing a border down and illegal migrants, many of whom were carrying illegal narcotics with them for the cartel, smuggling them in, why are drug seizures actually up from the Biden administration?
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for having me on. The problem is these cartels, these criminal networks they're highly adaptive. They're very sophisticated, and they're going to respond to our movement on the border and the decrease in apprehensions in a way that makes them successful. And unfortunately,
specific. I mean, if they're nailing down all of the illegal crossings in the night over the river into the desert, there's a truck, picks them up, takes them to Chicago. If all of that is stopped, how are the heroin, the cocaine, the methamphetamine, the fentanyl, how do they get in?
Well, the legal points of entry, the same roads and highways that we would take to go into Mexico are the same ways that they're bringing a lot of the drugs into the United States. They're just, they're trying to overwhelm our resources there with just the high volume of traffic. And fentanyl it doesn't take a lot to do a lot of damage. I mean, so, multiple small loads is just as effective as, one or two large loads. And, they'll use tunnels, they'll use drones, they'll use, the ocean, Canada. I mean, they're gonna adapt. They're gonna figure out ways to.
All right, I got it, but it should. I'm stunned that the drug importation is up while the migrants have been largely stopped. Now, fentanyl is usually mixed in with heroin or cocaine, and that's how it's sold on the street. The price of drugs on the street is pretty cheap right now throughout the United States, right?
It is. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a rise in our prices. It means they just saturate the market, and they continue to do so. They're very good at that. They control the supply chain, the distribution chain, and yeah, we haven't seen a reduction in the prices, unfortunately. The demand is too great.
Yeah, the demand is huge, and it's not expensive now to buy a lot of drugs, even though crimes are committed to get the money by the addicts. My thing has always been, you're not going to win the importation war. You're not going to stop the drug importation. It's just too much corruption, too much money, and you're always going to get it in. And if I'm wrong, tell me, because 30 years in this business, you know more than I do. But you can't stop it, particularly when you have almost 30 million Americans wanting to buy it on a daily basis. But the demand side, you can't stop. And that's what they did in Singapore, where I did my thesis at Harvard on. They stopped the demand side, where if you are caught in Singapore, which is a fascist country, with drugs in your bloodstream, you go to mandatory drug rehab, 21 months. So you're gone. You can't buy any drugs anymore. And they took the market away. So there's no drug problem in Singapore. You couldn't exactly do that here, but you could replicate some of it. Am I wrong?
Yeah, we could absolutely do more here to reduce the demand. We, first of all, let's have the serious conversation and let's fund it. Instead of putting band-aids on the situation. I mean, we have such a small portion of the world's population, yet we consume the majority of drugs. I mean, we need to figure that out.
By far.
More than anyone else.
Right,
absolutely.
Because we have money. But you say fund the drug rehab. You got to want drug rehab. Most of these addicts don't want it. And that comes from the rehab studies. They don't want to get off it. They want to be high every day. And you can take them in and try to rehab them, and they back out and they want to use. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately, we know it does take numerous attempts through rehab to break through, right? To help them.
So why am I doing that? I don't want my money doing that. I don't want to spend money on those people. I want to take them, put them someplace for a period of time. All right, isolate them. And then if they do it again, then the period of time gets more. And then they'll stop because they can't get their drugs. I don't want to be paying for 15 rehabs. Am I wrong? Am I mean?
I think we need to isolate why are they using drugs. I mean, that's why we
what?
do.
What do you mean why? They're using it because they want to get high. That's why they're using it. They want to get intoxicated. What do I don't care whether they had a bad childhood. All right.
Well, I mean, well, it may not be our problem, but we can be human towards them and fund that problem, because we know that that trauma,
Waste of
the
money.
abuse, those things are
Waste of money.
if we can solve the root problems, we can we can
You
help
can't
them.
solve the root problem. This is like migration. You can't solve the root problem. The root problem is they're poor in Honduras. We're wealthy. That's the root problem. Ask Kamala Harris. She was in charge of the root problem. The root problem of taking drugs is weakness, cowardice. These people are weak. They want to get high. They don't want to live in the real world. That's what drives me crazy, because we as a country won't admit it. Last word.
I know we look at this as a moral failing, but I think there's more than that, and the stigma and the way that we treat folks because of this, make it difficult for them to get treatment. And I think if we look at this a little differently, yeah, we might spend a little bit more money on the front end, but I think on the back end, we're going to be, one is saving people, and number two is ultimately saving money,
All right.
resources.
Well, you and I have a gentleman's disagreement. And you talk about stigma. What about the stigma of these people mugging some old lady going to the bodega trying to get some food? Is that okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
What about ruining the city of San Francisco? What about shooting up heroin in your neck in front of children? What about all that? Does anyone feel sorry for them? I'll tell you what,
No,
I'm in charge of this, Mr. Townsend. You give me 6 months, I'll cut it by half. But these people aren't going to like what happens to them. I'm not going to be mean to them, not going to abuse them. They're going to be isolated. And that is the only way to do it. We appreciate your time very much. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on X. Look for @Bill O'Reilly.